Hey everybody, hope you're all doing well. My name is Steven and this is the Storytime channel. Today we've got some malicious compliance stories and our first story of the day is by Leathermaker. Okay, I'll carry items that don't sell. When I was in my early 20s, I was a seafood department manager for a chain grocery store. I was good at my job, motivated to do the best for my company, etc. At my first store, I increased the sales and gross profit percentage within a few months. After a year, I got transferred to a larger store that had tons of issues with instructions to turn things around. Within 3 months, we were leading the district. After a year there, I get transferred yet again with the same instructions, which is where the fun begins. This store was the smallest in the district and was barely making money. My first store averaged $12K in sales per week, my second $20K in sales. The third counter was only doing $3 to $4K in sales per week and was losing money. 5 different department managers had failed in trying to fix things. My first week was spent getting things organized, going over sales reports, and getting to know the type of shoppers the store had. The problem was easy to see. The company was trying to sell things that people didn't want to buy. I quickly changed what was being ordered. Since it was such a slow store, there was a lot of downtime during the day. I was ordering whole fish and marketing everything in multiple ways. Whole but pre-cleaned, steaks, fillets, even the head and bones. Cutting everything myself. I also switched from fresh to frozen for high-dollar items that didn't sell well. I was keeping very detailed records in Excel spreadsheets. I was bringing in a lot less overall product, but had a much better variety that our customers actually wanted. By the end of the third month, we were doing almost $6K in sales per week, and my profit was again leading the district. It was something crazy like 50% when the target was 30%. Most people were coming in the store, so total sales were increasing as well. The fourth month was just as good, even though it was during our slow time, midsummer. Enter the district manager and my supervisor. Both came in to visit after seeing the reports for my third and fourth month. They had figured the third month was a fluke, and when they got the fourth month, they figured I must be playing with the numbers somehow. Their first reaction was, "Wow, the department looks amazing." As I showed them what had been happening and what I had done to fix it, you could see the supervisor getting more impressed, while the district manager was getting mad. I finally looked at the district manager and asked what was wrong. He went on a 10-minute rant about needing to carry all of the things that didn't sell and asked why I didn't have fresh flounder. I replied that when we carried it at full price, we would only sell about 2 pounds per week, but would have to order 20 pounds. Things came in 10-pound increments and fresh fish had to be ordered twice a week to carry it. I explained that doing things like that on a regular basis was why the department had been losing money. I also explained that I had been told by the supervisor, who was there, to fix things any way I could. The supervisor denied saying that. I was told I was to follow the plan the company had for the district at all times, and if I ever didn't have something on the sheet or had something that wasn't on the sheet, I would face disciplinary action. I asked for the instructions in writing this time and received it in the form of a written verbal warning for failure to follow instructions. Malicious Compliance Part 1. I was obviously pissed, but I did as I was told. The next month was a nightmare. The store manager, district manager, and supervisor were constantly checking on me and trying to find things to write me up for. At the end of the month, we had sales just over $3K per week with a 2% gross profit, and thousands of dollars of fish had been thrown away when they went bad. We also were getting customer complaints about not having the items they wanted. The district manager and supervisor came back in and started chewing me out. I sat patiently until I was asked if I had anything to say. I pulled out my reports that showed that I had ordered everything I was supposed to and how much of that was being thrown away because my customers didn't want it or couldn't afford it. Things went back and forth and I finally asked how 2 people who obviously knew nothing about marketing had reached the positions they had. Maybe a mistake, but I was young and hot-headed. This time, I ended up with written warnings for insubordination and failure to follow instructions and was told I was being demoted to clerk because I didn't know how to do my job. I challenged both through the union. Long story short, the insubordination was lowered to a verbal warning, and the failure to follow instructions was completely removed since I had written proof that I was doing exactly what I was told. I was given a full-time clerk position at a different store and kept my manager pay. I ended up staying for about 8 more years before being forced out after refusing multiple promotion offers. They wanted to eliminate the full-time spot to save money, but couldn't take away my full-time. That isn't the end of the story. Malicious Compliance Part 2. The way I had been treated pissed off a lot of people at a lot of stores in the area. A lot of the same people also got worried the company would do the same to them, which sparked 2 issues. The first was almost every seafood department started following the company plan 100%. People started getting jobs with competitors as well. Over the next 2 years, seafood profits went down company-wide, which affected all other sales, and a lot of talented people had jumped ship. The company ended up closing about 1/3 of their seafood counters. They switched to pre-packed product and closed 3 slow stores altogether in attempts to increase their gross profit. Not sales or actual profit, just the percentage. They are still around, but they lost a lot of market share and still struggle to keep talented employees. I no longer work any form of retail and will never go back. So if you had been hustling for this company and making them all this money, all these gross profit margins way above anything they had been seeing before, and then they go and throw you under the bus and just toss away all the work you've been trying to put in, would you be fine working that lesser job at the same salary rate? Or would their treatment be the last straw and you would be looking for any new opportunity? Let me know in the comments down below. Our next story is by Jekyll and Javert. Bothering me? Sure, I'll annoy the boss on your behalf. When I was in college, I worked for a dollar store. The boss was great about giving people unpaid time off whenever they asked for it, as long as they asked for it far enough in advance. I always got the time off that I asked for. One time, I was working on some schoolwork in my university's library, and I got a call from a coworker asking me if I could cover his closing shift that night because it was his birthday and he had forgotten to ask off. Closing shift started at 5:30. I explained to him that because of classes that night, I couldn't do it, as I wouldn't be able to get there until between 6:30 and 7. He begged me to take the shift. He called and texted me a couple more times over the next half hour or so, and I said not unless he could somehow make it so that it would be okay for me to get there an hour to an hour and a half late. Eventually, he asks me to get in touch with our general manager and ask her if it would be okay. At this point, I had it. So I told him I would text the boss. What I didn't tell him is that I texted her something along the lines of, "Hey boss, coworker keeps hassling me to take his shift. I told him I couldn't because of my classes and he wouldn't take it for an answer, so he keeps asking me to get in touch with you. Now I have." It's important to note that my boss would get upset with me if she even thought I was missing class to come to work. Goodness, she was awesome. A few minutes after I sent that text, I got a call from one of the assistant managers asking me if it was true that I had agreed to cover his shift. I explained to her what I told the coworker. She said that he had convinced one of the day shift workers to stay late until I got there. When I went in, I found out that general manager had called the store after I texted her, since she wasn't actually there when this went down. She basically told coworker that he's bothering people and he needs to knock it off, and that is a good way to get himself fired. You gotta love working jobs for great bosses. It can really make a job that otherwise might seem like a rather bad or dreary or dull kind of job into one that you enjoy or at least appreciate because of an awesome boss. Our next story is by Random Medical. Don't change the assignments? Got it. I'm a nurse practitioner at a mid-sized hospital. There are 2 shifts of providers, days and nights. I work nights. We strictly admit patients and day shift does rounds and discharges. At night, we normally distribute our admissions overnight to the day providers. We choose the best doc for the patient based on their strengths, and we also try to make sure everyone has approximately the same number of patients when they come in for their shifts. This sounds more complicated than it actually is. However, enter upper management. They decide to get a program that will automatically distribute all the patients so everyone gets as close to the same number as possible. The new program launched. We have conference calls with the vendor every day for a month because the software wasn't communicating with our charting software properly. When it did kinda work, patients were being missed and that created more problems. The vendor started blaming us that we were not running the software correctly. The user interface was fairly simple, but they could not admit that their software sucks. I would change some patients around to make sure one didn't get all the critical patients we admitted overnight. We brought our concerns to management and they basically fell on deaf ears. The vendor said this was causing problems. Management advised to just let the program make the assignments and not to change it. You got it. To note, the software only sees a patient as a number, not acuity. It cannot differentiate between a critical care patient and something easy that can be discharged after a few hours. The first day, one doc got all of the critical care admits. We also have one provider who can't see certain infectious patients. He had several assigned to him. Many patients were missing from the assignments as well, which means they were not seen and discharges were delayed. None of this would have happened with the old system. This goes on for a week. All the providers are complaining every day now. We are losing money because patients aren't being seen, so they can't bill for services. Management finally suspends the use of the crappy software after all the complaints. Despite multiple attempts at voicing my concerns, I just had to do what management wanted so everyone could see what a bad idea this was. I think this is a case of if it's not broke, don't fix it. It's like reinventing the wheel. You had a process that worked just fine. You're gonna try and apply some kind of sandpapery software that can smooth this stone out so it can roll so much smoother, but then you end up just kind of chipping parts off or snapping it in half, instead of some smoother, more perfect wheel. And our final story of the day is by Izakor. We have spent millions on this software. Use it. I'm sure a lot of us have had call center experience and the gripes that come with, so I hope you guys can get a chuckle from mine. I worked at a telecommunication customer service a few years back, and it was my first non-fast food job. So I was pretty stoked, and to be honest, the work environment was sweet. I was doing customer support for one of the big packages in the Midwest. Cable, internet, VoIP phone packages. We had to take a technical test upon interviewing, and if you managed to score high enough, they would allow you to move straight into their small business support team instead of starting in residential. I was in school for network systems administration at the time, and I murdered that test. They called me within an hour of leaving and offered me the job working for their small business support. The truly great part about doing small business support instead of residential was we had a plethora of extra tools and didn't have to follow the workflow their intuitive troubleshooting program would suggest for us to do for issues, which usually led to much faster results and happier customers, as we were able to really show off just how far we were willing to go to resolve their issues instead of just reading the screen word for word. A few months pass and our call center starts losing some of their calls to overseas centers. As to why, your guess is as good as mine, but it led to the center deciding we would be moving all small business calls to a center in Texas, and everyone at our center would be forced to go residential. But we would keep our same pay. So I wasn't terribly upset over it at the time. They told us, however, about a week in, they implemented their worst policy change. We want all of our reps to follow the intuitive troubleshooting program word for word based on the issue your customer is having. Now, I wasn't super upset until I realized how dumb the software really was. You would select someone has no internet, and it would ask you to have them try to browse to a website. You could put that the modem had no lights and they would still suggest the same 3 things regardless. Try to browse, try to reboot, press the reset pin. On what would be my last day, I get called in for helping a customer log into their modem to reset their Wi-Fi password when my workflow advised me to reboot. I explained my reasoning and had them finish the call to verify the customer was stoked, but they didn't care because I was wasting the millions they spent on this stupid software that I can only guess was coded by someone who had never used the products in their life. So from then on, I just did as the workflow advised. I rebooted, pissed people off, and ignored their concerns to continue with the workflow, regardless of how dumb the next action item it wanted me to take was. Cable box has no lights on it? No problem, I'll ship you a new remote because that's what my software says to do. Oh, you need a Wi-Fi password and it isn't on the back of your modem? Guess I'll send you a $100 technician to replace it. This led to my boss pulling me back in the next day to say that I was taking everything too literally and needed to decide to either conform or quit. I handed him my badge and left without a word. They called for the next 2 weeks on and off as half the center started hitting the same frustrations and issues. About 3 months later, they shut down. We all love following rigid processes that you cannot get around in any means whatsoever, written by people who don't have enough knowledge about those rigid processes. It's just a recipe for disaster, and it sure did make a disaster cake right here. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today, so if you have a favorite story of the day, let me know which story and why in the comments down below. But besides that, if you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like, and if you haven't, subscribe and turn notifications on so you'll never miss an upcoming video. No matter what you do, whether it's just viewing the video, liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, I appreciate the heck out of it. Every little thing that you do helps the channel grow that much more, and I can't thank you enough for it. So until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll be right here next time on the Storytime channel.